Good Monday evening, no matter where you are in the city. We were talking. Welcome to From the Halls of Justice. And this evening, we have two spectacular guests. We have our very special guest, the Honorable Judge Rudolph Diaz, who has been recognized, and rightly so, as a local hero. And I think it's just amazing that he's a judge's judge. He was in charge and supervised all the judges in the Los Angeles Superior Court, recognized on KCET, profiled, and just has really done some outstanding work in the community. Also with us this evening is going to be my special co-host here that he just found out about. And his name is Nicholas A. Salick. He is an awesome attorney. His specialty is with children with disabilities.
Yes, family law in general, but yes, the special needs children, absolutely.
And they love him. That's just, Nick has a lot of energy and very honest and forthright. So thank you so much for being here and joining us on From the Halls of Justice.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Judge Diaz, I'm going to start out because I'm going to turn Mr. Salick loose in a second. Okay. But once again, I was a little jealous because we have been together for a few years with you being a guest on the show. And once again, I was so proud of you. And it was a really beautiful piece, what KCET did. So once again, from 1992 to 1994, you served as chairman of the presiding judges of 21 Los Angeles County municipal courts.
Correct.
That is amazing.
It was a lot of responsibility, and whenever there were some major episodes in the county, for example, during the earthquake, some of the courthouses were not able to function. So we had to coordinate our efforts to, because these are really different jurisdictions,
okay.
and so we had to get an okay from the Supreme Court basically to be able to cross jurisdictions so we can still keep our cases moving along. And my job was also to represent the interests of the municipal courts and the presiding judges, and I would do that locally before the board of supervisors. I would do it in Sacramento. And it was the only job I had. I actually was not carrying a calendar at the time, but it was a full-time job because in the county there are numerous task forces that relate or have some connection with the judiciary. So I represented the interests of the judiciary when I did that, and also was able to share and work with district attorney, public defender, mental health, the alcohol and drug programs, and help make policy with respect to how we should be looking at drug treatment, for example. So it was quite an experience. I really enjoyed the 3 years that I was in that capacity.
That's a lot of power, and you're a wise man.
Thank you.
Now, you were also named the first Latino judge to be elected as president of the California Judges Association.
Yeah, that was quite an honor, and I think I'm still the only one who ever has served. It's been a few years since that occurred, and I had a dual responsibility. I still have my role as the president of the California Judges Association, but I also think I had a responsibility regarding Latino issues, and also upstarting judicial officers who were Latino. And actually other minorities too, because I grew up in Compton, and so I had a strong connection with the African American judges too.
You grew up in Compton?
I did.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you and Judge Filer have a lot in common.
Oh, and there are other judges. One of my best friends sits in Compton right now. His name is Alan Webster.
Okay.
Alan and I were in elementary school together back in 1949.
Okay.
So we were in the same classroom, even though he was a year ahead of me, because it was such a small Catholic school that they had 2 or 3 grades in one classroom. So Al and I look back at our years way, and sometimes we can't believe where we are. And we came from actually the streets of South Los Angeles, and some of us that have done that say it's just a stroke of luck sometimes that you can get through all that and end up somewhere in a profession like this.
Good things have come out of Compton. I am impressed.
Yeah.
So
straight out of Compton.
okay, that's amazing. That's wonderful. Mr. Salick, you're straight out of Beverly Hills, or tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you
Well,
come
West
from?
LA.
West LA. Okay.
I was born and raised locally. My father's a rheumatologist, and so both my mom and dad were born and raised in Los Angeles. I went to high school locally. I went to UC Santa Cruz undergrad, University of Laverne for law school, and after a couple stints as an associate in Kern County and Orange County, I ended up back in Los Angeles County.
Okay. Well, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
We're happy to have you. Now, this is a rare and I hope a fine opportunity. If you were out and about town, Judge Diaz has, like I said, been a guest on the show with me for several years, and Judge Cunningham, now I know he knows Judge Filer, Judge Craig Mitchell. We were talking about the running. I didn't know that Judge Diaz implemented a running program also with the Mission for the Children.
I did.
That's amazing. So with this opportunity, what would you like to ask Judge Diaz? You get to help me out here.
Well, from an attorney standpoint, and also from curiosity, when you were, the presiding judge for all of the presiding judges in LA County?
I was a chairman for the presiding judges. We had 22 muni courts at that time, and now, of course, it's all one court now. And so it was just impossible for a presiding judge in a small court. And the size of the courts varied from one judge to 80 judges, like in downtown Los Angeles. So someone had to speak for the group and meet once a month to make sure that we knew what our common interests were. So I had the chance to represent them like that.
And so were there what were some examples of issues that you fielded?
Well,
various judges?
there were money issues, funding issues. Municipal courts at that time had the ability to generate monies for the county, which gave us leverage for things like new judgeships, for example, or commissionerships, and new buildings and stuff like that. So, or security issues. At one time, way back, there was a shooting in a courtroom, and it happened in a courtroom that was basically an old trailer. They made the trailers instead of building new. So we didn't.
So this wasn't 111 North Hill Street.
No.
Okay.
This was actually in Van Nuys.
Okay.
And somebody came in with a gun and started firing, basically, and we didn't have weapon screening at that time. So everyone had to, get up to speed on the weapon screening and train the marshals who were the bailiffs for the municipal courts at that time.
Wow.
So those are some of the issues when the earthquakes occurred and buildings were inoperable. We had to find makeshifts to keep the courts moving. When we had the services right after the Rodney King trial, again, some of those courtrooms out in that part of town had to be closed down for the safety of the people who worked in those courts. So it helped. We got to coordinate all that, keep things moving along, and salaries. We negotiated with the county in those days and the state to establish the salaries. I mean, we were pretty low paying when I first started. I started in 1980, and it was only over a period of time that it just started going up.
I was going to say, you deserve a raise.
Frankly, I don't have any problem now. I think we were paid fine. I'm very satisfied with how we're compensated. So I don't have a problem with that. We have pretty good retirement benefits, even though I haven't taken advantage of that yet. Someday, but I am really enjoying what I've been doing for the last 37 years now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
I have a case pending now in Santa Barbara County, in downtown Santa Barbara, and
It's a lovely courthouse.
it's a beautiful courthouse. It's on Anacapa Street,
Yeah.
and there's no security, there's no screening, and so you literally walk into the courthouse, and then walk into the courtroom, and there's the courtroom and the judge and the bailiff and the clerk, and I raised that issue to the bailiff. I'm like, I practice mostly in LA County. I've never seen a courthouse where there's no screening whatsoever. And he basically rolled his eyes and said, that's what we've been complaining about. And I said, unfortunately, it's going to be a situation where, something's going to have to happen. And he,
Well, exactly.
joked with the clerk.
Well,
But it's really
some
unfortunate.
of those courthouses like Santa Barbara are so old, they really don't have the room for these things. They'd have to basically redesign the very structure that they don't want to touch, because it takes a certain amount of area to put in the equipment, and then for people to line up. So they just don't want to touch the buildings. I'm sure it's a lovely courthouse.
Yeah,
like we're
it's
saying.
beautiful. What some other employees said was that because there's tourists who regularly come down to the courthouse, and they said that
Tourist.
tourists, because it's a historic courthouse. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and that they didn't want to scare the tourists away.
Oh,
And
really?
they thought that it would be menacing and intimidating to
Well.
have a metal detector.
Well,
It's-
I
it's
would think that
cost benefit.
I think tourists understand, unless they're from another country or something. But
There actually were, yeah.
there was, but you understand that times have changed, and you do have to take precautions.
I was going to say, I remember a time, and it was Van Nuys Courthouse. However, this was an incident where the gentleman, I don't know if it was probate or family law, but he found I think it was a probate matter, he found his attorney outside.
I do remember that. It was a family law case.
Is that what it was? And he was
Was there a
shooting
probate
him?
case? I saw it because that was on. There was a court TV was there. They happened
was
to be there, and they were filmed. They
Ducking
filmed it.
behind the tree.
Yeah,
oh
dodging.
Shooting out the attorney.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So, well, at least he wasn't inside, so that part worked. Yeah.
He was very fortunate.
He was
obviously,
extremely
that,
fortunate.
He was able to avoid getting seriously hurt. I think he was actually shot.
He was hit a few times.
Yeah, but
like in the arms. It wasn't serious, but
Yeah.
considering the point blank range.
But it's interesting that it happened at Van Nuys, because when I mentioned it was a case where a guy came in with high-powered weapons, and there was actually a shootout between him and the bailiffs.
Wow.
And there was a judge in the courtroom, the clerk,
Jeez.
and other people, and they had to, of course, hit the ground. And nowadays, of course, you could hit a button to alert the other backups that come out to the courtroom. They didn't have it in those trailers, so people were just heard sounds, and they responded to it.
Was this a family law matter too?
No, that was a municipal court matter.
Okay.
Somebody didn't like the prosecutor, and he was really coming back for the prosecutor in that case.
Okay.
But he just started shooting away, and this bailiff was able to somehow avoid getting shot. And they were separated by no more than 10 feet. And when a table had been turned over, so they were separated by the table and sort of shooting over it. And fortunately, I guess the bad guy got hit, and the bailiff was also able to escape being hurt and stuff, and nobody else was harmed. But it really did cause us to change things. So we had to be more responsible to not just ourselves, but certainly the general public. So.
Well, I like this. Mr. Salick. Salick? Do you like Salick or Salick?
Either way, Salick is good.
Okay. Mr. Salick had a question, and I was looking at it, and I really like it. This is for Judge Diaz. Can you tell us the 3 top things that
Irk.
irk you about judges?
Yeah, interesting word.
I know. You're awesome. Yes. What?
Well, here's I have pet peeves, of course.
Okay.
But there are a few things I would say that, if you want to use the word irk, I would say lawyers who are not prepared for the case, because it just means continuance, or You're wasting court time.
That's right.
The second thing might be lawyers who tend to be over dramatic. We don't use juries, in the courtroom. So, and I'm not going to decide a case based on how bad you feel as a lawyer. I'm going to decide a case on the law as best as I can. And I have feelings, I have emotions, and the situations can be emotional. And I do understand that, but I think a lawyer has an obligation to be professional at all times. And so do I. And so our emotions have to be secondary. We have to stay focused on the issues before us. We have to understand that ultimately we're going to have to follow the law. The appellate courts are going to reverse us. So that's where we have to be. So I try to get counsel to, just argue your case. And it's not personal. If I make a decision, it has nothing to do with you whatsoever. It has to do with the issue, your client's interests, and that's our obligation, and that's what we're taught to do.
Mm-hmm.
And after all these years, I've heard all the arguments. I think probably made them myself. In fact, when I was a lawyer, but though you're wasting time. You're basically wasting time. And maybe the other is when attorneys refuse to abide by a ruling, when evidentiary ruling, and I'm saying this is not relevant, or it's too prejudicial, and it's going to take too much court time to go into it, and it's not that relevant, and so I'm going to have to tell you to, avoid this area of inquiry. But some attorneys were still trying to get into this evidence. You're just wasting our time, so stop. Let's keep on. Ask your next question.
Do you recall ever sanctioning an attorney?
I only had one occasion where I didn't actually sanction. I cited a lawyer for making this statement, and I write it off as a young lawyer, not realizing, getting emotional on a case, and saying something that she should not have said. It was disrespectful, and I had an obligation, not just to myself personally, but certainly to the system. You just can't say whatever you want. You're in a courtroom. So I had to cite the attorney, and but I didn't hold the attorney. I just wrote her off as inexperienced and let it go at that. And hopefully that attorney learned from that experience, and others too that were around. So,
Are you at liberty to say what was said? Of course, we're not mentioning any names here, but
well, the attorney argued that I had not even listened to the evidence that she was presenting, and
always a winning argument.
That's and the thing is, I take notes, so I do. You're forced to listen if you're taking notes. So I always listen, and even though I've heard them, and I don't take notes of everything that's being said because I'm just looking at the particular issues, and it was offensive to suggest that I was not doing my job, that I was ignoring your side and only paying attention to the other side. So I was just cautioning that sometimes you can say something that is truly offensive. You're sort of suggesting that the court is acting in misconduct, misconduct on the part of the court, and that's just not a good way to address the court. And it was a young lawyer. So I think the lawyer probably learned from it. I hope. I haven't seen her again. But
you are wisdom under control, because that's
well,
great.
That is one of my, I think my attributes. They say I'm pretty calm, and I try to be calm, and I don't think you last this long on the bench if you don't learn to control your emotions and be calm, and also set a certain tenor for the courtroom too, to keep everybody calm and just focus on these. I do understand people are going to get emotional, and sometimes you just tolerate it for a while, and then you regain the control as best you can.
Right.
Especially when children are involved.
Oh, especially when children are involved. Yeah, I don't want to upset children. There are times when things get a little heated, and we actually try to remove the children out of the courtroom when some parents, obviously you're removing the child from a parent, and the parent just doesn't understand the issue. Sometimes it's serious issues, and they just don't really see it as serious, and they get pretty emotional, and your bailiff is there and all that scene, and sometimes you have to exclude the parent out of the courtroom until they calm down, and the children have already gone through trauma. And it's so also traumatic to be away from your parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's traumatic that you've been in somebody stranger's home for a while now. So, and then coming to court that you don't understand. And we try to be very sensitive to everybody, but particularly to the child. I mean, it's already being traumatized, and I have to say that in many cases, that whole courtroom experience is sometimes harmful to the child as well. And to see, because they come out of the side room, and as soon as they see their parent, you can see it, Mommy, Daddy, and they run over and hug their mom and dad. And I know there's love there. There's no question about it. But you still have a concern here. This case is here that has to be dealt with. And again, people are going to get emotional.
Which, if you don't mind, one of the questions that's on the list is, and I'm going to ask it, but I'm going to preface it with an experience I had. Have you ever come across any of the parties in any cases you've presided over? And I ask that because I've run into judges, close to the courthouse, maybe coming and going.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was practicing in Kern County when I first started, I was at the gym one afternoon or one weekend, and there was a family law judge who was on one of the machines, and I went up and said, "Oh, Judge so-and-so, how are you?" And she looked a little startled, and perhaps it was because we were both in civilian or gym clothes. We were, she was not in her robe and I was not in my suit. But it made me wonder if there's parties. I'm sure there's parties who come across her or come across other judges and maybe have a bone to pick with you. So has that ever happened to you?
Probably. And I say that because when I was in municipal court, you're in a smaller, you're not in LA, you're in a smaller area. And, you're in the community. I mean, I used to bowl, every week. And people would come to the bowling alley, or I'd go shopping in the grocery store. I would still be out in the community doing something. And many times you see somebody give you a second look or stare at you, and you
look
wonder,
familiar.
and you can't remember all the cases, of course. So, and I did have one person who, when I was bowling, in fact, approached me, and then he asked me who I was, and fortunately I was bowling with my bailiff, so he was nearby. So I said yes, and then he said, "I want to thank you for giving me a chance. I just want you to know." So that was a nice compliment. But I went to a swap meet one time, and this one person just was stalking me, and I wasn't. But he wasn't. He didn't look menacing. He just wanted to watch me and see what I was doing, I guess. And I figured he may have been somebody who was in the courtroom, but I don't know. But I think we do get out in the community and. In bar meetings and funerals, weddings, and so we're always in the public, and we try not to advertise the fact that we are on the bench. I don't want people to think that they will be. In fact, some people get really nervous sometimes when we're out there and don't know, and that's okay. And I golf once a week in a local municipal course, and. People know that I'm a judge. I'm not the only one in the group that is. In fact, there are 3 other people who play with me are all judges, and we just enjoy the experience and enjoy the atmosphere. And so sometimes some people call us judge, some people call us by our first name, but you also have to be careful. We're always in the public eye, and we always are judges, and we always have to be careful how people see us. You can't. Swearing and getting upset, throwing your clubs and stuff like that.
Don't you know who I am? I'm a judge.
And you can't, sometimes people want to do you favors, and you don't want them to do that. You want them to treat just like anybody else that they're mixing with. So, but you have to be concerned about, there are people who have threatened my life and other judges as well. And you never know where they're at sometimes. If they're a serious threat, you alert law enforcement and to make sure you know where they're at, and make sure they don't know where you are at as well. Right. And it's very difficult when you are being threatened and you have family or you have to be concerned about, because you don't know how serious the threat is, but you have to assume it's serious. So you have to address it sometimes, and so it does affect your life. So, yeah. So you want to be in the public eye because you're going to run for election someday too. So you have to be involved in the community, but you also have to be prudent. You just have to be careful sometimes, and watch and not in terms of your safety, but in terms of the image as well. We can't do certain things. You can't run a store you can't have your own cafe, for example, and serve as a host, or
You can't call it Judge's Diner.
With what?
You can't call it Judge's Diner.
No, you can't do that. No, there are certain things we cannot do, for example, and that's one. And so, if you go to a ball game, you have to be careful. If you get overly excited about something, that's something you have to be worried about. So, yeah, we have to be worried about our safety. We have to be worried about our image. Always.
Well, Judge Filer is not embarrassed. He loves Compton. He loves Compton. His heart is for Compton, and his father loved Compton. So I found that all of you are so passionate, and you really love and care about people. And that really touches my heart.
Well, yeah, I think I certainly can speak for myself, certainly and many others. We're very privileged to have these jobs. I think it's the greatest job in the world, obviously. That's why I'm still doing it.
It suits you.
And I can do things. And that's why this particular assignment in particular, where I deal with abused children and neglect and so forth, you can really make a difference in somebody's life.
Absolutely.
Not just the child. That is the primary focus. But even on the parent, you can show the parent how to parent, basically. A lot of them, when you have kids, you don't go through, any kind of training to become a parent. You're a parent one day, basically. And some parents they're very young. They're 18, 19 years old, and they barely can take care of themselves, and now they have a responsibility. And so there are a lot of the young parents that come into our system, and we're not really trying to take the kids away from them. We put in, we provide services so they can, either it's substance abuse or just parenting education.
Absolutely.
You don't have to take your belt out the minute, these are innocent little children, and you don't have to do that. You can control a child, you can direct a child, and you have to learn how to do it sometimes because they've never had that. They didn't grow up that way. So,
in my practice, I tell clients that there's a very, very thin line between just parenting and corporal punishment and domestic violence, and it's a very thin line. It's sometimes gray.
Yeah.
It's not black and white.
I think one of the ways to test you is what's your level of emotion.
We are at the end of the
wow.
show. Wasn't that a quick 28 minutes and 30 seconds? And I would invite you to stay in the studio with me and come back from the Halls of Justice. And we're on local channel 36 in beautiful West Hollywood. And we're here with the Honorable Judge Rudolph Diaz, local hero, community servant, and the wonderful Nicholas A. Salick, and just an honest, loving, hard-working attorney who fights for children. And I'm honored to have them on the show. Join us next week from the Halls of Justice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Cunningham.